The bitter wind howled across the New Mexico territory, carrying snow that bit like tiny daggers against Ruby Nielsen's face as she stumbled forward through knee-deep drifts. Her breath came in ragged gasps, forming small clouds that disappeared instantly in the freezing air. One hand clutched her swollen belly, 7 months pregnant and far too vulnerable in this merciless December of 1885. Behind her, miles back, lay everything she'd fled: the burning remains of her family's homestead and the men who had destroyed it. "Keep going," she whispered to herself, her legs burning with exhaustion. The snow had fallen steadily for 2 days, transforming the usually arid landscape outside Las Cruces into an unforgiving white wasteland. Ruby had been traveling for nearly 6 hours, having escaped before dawn. The thin shawl wrapped around her shoulders provided little protection, and her dress was soaked through from the snow. Each step became more laborious than the last, her strength waning as the afternoon sun began its early winter descent. A sharp pain lanced through her abdomen, causing her to double over. "Not now," she pleaded, rubbing her belly. "Please, little one, not here." The baby kicked in response, as if to reassure her. Ruby forced herself upright and pushed onward, though her pace had slowed considerably. She didn't notice the rider approaching until he was less than 50 yards away. When she did, terror seized her heart. Had they found her? Ruby lurched sideways, attempting to hide behind a scrubby pine, but her condition made stealth impossible. "Madam," a deep voice called out, "are you all right?" Ruby peered around the tree. A tall man sat atop a sturdy chestnut mare. He wore a worn sheepskin coat and a wide-brimmed hat crusted with snow. Unlike the men who had attacked her home, he rode alone, and his face, partially hidden by a thick beard, showed concern rather than malice. "Stay back," Ruby warned, her voice cracking with cold and fear. The man dismounted slowly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Name's Wade Rawlins, madam. I've got a small ranch about 5 miles east of here. You're in a bad way out in this weather." Ruby remained silent, one hand protectively covering her belly. Wade took a tentative step forward, then stopped when he saw her shrink back. "You're expecting," he observed quietly, "and you're freezing to death out here. Whatever you're running from, it can't be worth the life of your child." Another contraction seized Ruby, stronger this time. She gasped, clutching at a low-hanging branch for support. Wade moved with surprising speed for a man of his size. Before Ruby could protest, he was beside her, steadying her with a strong arm. "You need help," he said firmly. "I'm not asking what happened or why you're out here alone, but you need shelter, and soon." Ruby looked up into his face. His eyes were a clear blue, steady and honest. Despite her fear, she could sense no threat from him. "They burned my home," she found herself saying. "My husband's been dead 3 months. They said the land was theirs now." Wade's jaw tightened beneath his beard. "Who did?" "Men working for Jeremiah Blackwell. They've been forcing people out all across the valley." Recognition flashed in Wade's eyes. "Blackwell's men don't come near my property," he said. "You'll be safe there." Another pain gripped Ruby, and she doubled over. Wade's expression changed to one of alarm. "Those are coming too frequently for someone who's not full term," he said. He led her to his horse and removed a blanket from his saddlebag, wrapping it around her shoulders. Then, with a decisive movement, he lifted her onto his mare. "What are you doing?" Ruby asked, startled by his actions. "You need to get warm and you need to rest," Wade said simply, adjusting the stirrups for her. "My place isn't far, but you can't walk it in your condition." "But what about you?" Ruby looked down at him from her perch on the horse. Wade patted the mare's neck. "Bessie here will carry you safely." "I'll walk alongside." He took the reins and began leading the horse through the snow. "I can't take your horse," Ruby protested. "You already have," Wade replied with a small smile. "Now, what's your name, Ruby?" "Ruby Nielsen." "Well, Mrs. Nielsen, let's get you somewhere warm." Wade led the mare carefully through the deepening snow, occasionally stopping to check on Ruby. The temperature was dropping rapidly as dusk approached, and he increased their pace as much as the conditions allowed. "How far along are you?" he asked after they had been traveling for nearly an hour. 7 months, Ruby replied, her teeth chattering despite the blanket. "My husband Thomas died in a mining accident before he knew about the baby." Wade nodded solemnly. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Nielsen." "Ruby," she corrected him. "After everything, I think you can call me Ruby." A small smile crossed Wade's face. "Ruby it is, then." The landscape had changed as they traveled eastward, with more trees providing some shelter from the driving snow. Eventually, a small cabin came into view, smoke curling from its chimney. "That's not my main house," Wade explained. "It's my line shack, but it's closer and it's warm. My ranch hand Emmett must have a fire going." As they approached, the door opened and a wiry man in his 60s peered out. "Mr. Rawlins," he called, "was wondering when you'd get back from town." "Got delayed by more than the weather, Emmett," Wade replied, helping Ruby dismount. "This is Mrs. Nielsen. She needs shelter and care." Emmett's eyebrows rose at the sight of Ruby's condition, but he asked no questions. "Get her inside, boss. I've got stew on." The warmth of the cabin enveloped Ruby like an embrace as Wade guided her inside. The space was simple but clean, with a stone fireplace along one wall and a small table with 2 chairs. A narrow bed occupied one corner, and shelves lined with provisions took up another. "Sit by the fire," Wade instructed, guiding her to a rocking chair near the hearth. "Emmett, we need hot water and clean cloths. Mrs. Nielsen may be going into early labor." Emmett moved with surprising efficiency for his age, filling a kettle and setting it to boil. Wade knelt before Ruby, concern etching his features. "How frequent are the pains now?" Ruby winced as another contraction began. "Too close," she admitted. "Every few minutes." Wade glanced at Emmett. "Ride to town and fetch Dr. Reynolds. Tell him it's urgent in this weather." Emmett looked doubtful. "Take the wagon trail. It's longer but more sheltered," Wade instructed. "And stop by the main house on your way back. Tell Mrs. Hawkins we need her skills here." After Emmett departed, Wade helped Ruby remove her snow-soaked outer garments and wrapped her in dry blankets. He moved with practiced efficiency, respectful of her modesty while ensuring she was warm and comfortable. "You seem to know what you're doing," Ruby observed, grateful for the fire's warmth seeping into her frozen limbs. Wade's expression clouded briefly. "My wife died in childbirth 3 years ago, along with our son." He spoke matter-of-factly, but Ruby could hear the pain beneath his words. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Wade shook his head. "No need, but it means I know enough to be concerned about your situation. The doctor should be here within 2 hours if the weather holds." "And if it doesn't?" Ruby asked, another contraction causing her to grip the chair's armrests. "Then we'll manage," Wade said firmly. "You and your baby will be fine." As the evening wore on, the contractions intensified. Wade remained calm, preparing the cabin for the possibility of delivery while keeping Ruby as comfortable as possible. He spoke little but moved with purpose, his presence reassuring in its steadiness. "Tell me about your husband," he said at last, bringing her a cup of hot tea. Ruby accepted the drink gratefully. "Thomas was kind, a dreamer. He came west believing we could build something from nothing." She smiled sadly. "We had nearly done it too. Our farm was small, but the soil was good. We were going to plant apple trees in the spring." Wade nodded. "And now Blackwell wants your land. Not just mine. He's been buying up properties all through the valley. Those who won't sell face accidents, fires." Ruby's hand tightened around the cup. "After Thomas died, they thought I'd be easy to scare off. When that didn't work, they came with torches." "Blackwell's been trying to expand for years," Wade said grimly. "His men shot my foreman last spring when he refused to let them drive cattle across our grazing land." "Is that why you helped me? Because we have a common enemy?" Wade looked surprised. "I helped you because you needed help, Ruby." "No other reason." The sincerity in his voice made Ruby's eyes fill with tears. Before she could respond, a particularly strong contraction doubled her over. The teacup slipped from her grasp, shattering on the wooden floor. "That's it," Wade said, quickly clearing the broken pieces. "We can't wait for the doctor. The baby's coming now." The next hours passed in a blur of pain for Ruby. Wade transformed into a competent birth attendant, his voice remaining steady as he guided her through each contraction. Despite the circumstances, Ruby felt an inexplicable trust in this stranger who had risked himself to save her. "One more push," Wade encouraged as dawn approached. "You're doing wonderfully, Ruby." With a final effort, Ruby felt her baby slip into the world. A moment of silence was followed by a robust cry. "A boy," Wade announced, his voice thick with emotion. "A healthy boy." He wrapped the infant in clean linen and placed him in Ruby's arms. Through tears of exhaustion and joy, Ruby gazed at her son's face. "Hello, Thomas," she whispered, naming him after his father. Wade busied himself with cleaning up, giving Ruby privacy with her newborn. When he finally sat beside her bed, his face showed both weariness and wonder. "Thank you," Ruby said, the words wholly inadequate for what she felt. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found me." Wade's gaze lingered on the baby. "He's perfect," he said softly. "You both are very brave." The door opened then, admitting a blast of cold air along with Emmett and a stout, gray-haired woman who immediately took charge of the situation. "Mrs. Hawkins," Wade explained to Ruby, "my housekeeper. She's delivered half the babies in the county, Mrs." Hawkins clucked her tongue as she examined both mother and child. "You've done a fine job, Mr. Rawlins, but now it's women's work. The doctor's been delayed by the storm but says he'll come when he can." Wade stood, suddenly awkward. "I'll leave you in good hands then." "Wade," Ruby called as he reached the door. When he turned, she said simply, "Don't go far." A smile warmed his tired eyes. "I won't." True to his word, Wade remained close at hand over the following days. The storm continued unabated, making travel to town impossible. Ruby and little Thomas stayed in the line shack, with Mrs. Hawkins attending to their needs during the day and Wade checking on them each evening. On the fifth day, as Ruby sat by the fire nursing Thomas, Wade entered with an armload of firewood. "The snow's stopping," he announced. "Road should be clear enough by tomorrow to take you into Las Cruces, if that's where you want to go." Ruby looked up, surprised by the hollow feeling his words created. "Is there somewhere I should go?" Wade set down the wood. "You mentioned family back east when you were fevered the first night." "I thought perhaps." "My parents disowned me when I married Thomas," Ruby said quietly. "They've never responded to my letters. I doubt they'd welcome their illegitimate grandson any more warmly than they did my choice of husband." Wade nodded, his expression unreadable. "Then you're welcome to stay here until you decide what's best. The main house has plenty of room and Mrs. Hawkins could use the company." "I can't impose. It's not an imposition," Wade interrupted. "Besides, Blackwell's men are still looking for you. My foreman spotted them asking questions at the Sanchez place yesterday." Fear clutched at Ruby's heart. "They won't give up, will they?" "Not until they get what they want." Wade's jaw tightened. "But they won't find you here." I've put the word out that a widow and her newborn were seen heading north toward Santa Fe." Ruby searched his face. "Why are you doing all this for me?" Wade was quiet for a long moment. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said finally. "And because when I found you in that snowstorm, something told me that helping you was important not just for you, but for me too." He cleared his throat, suddenly self-conscious. "Mrs. Hawkins says you and the boy can move to the main house tomorrow if you're feeling strong enough." "Thank you," Ruby said, recognizing that he had shared something significant, though she wasn't entirely sure what. The next morning, Ruby found herself installed in a comfortable bedroom in Wade's ranch house. The building was larger than she had expected, solidly built of timber and stone with wide windows that looked out over snow-covered pastures. Mrs. Hawkins bustled about, showing Ruby where everything was kept and explaining the daily routine. "Mr. Rawlins built this place for his wife," the housekeeper explained. "She never got to see it finished. He keeps adding to it, though. Says a home should grow with a family." "It's beautiful," Ruby said sincerely. "How long have you worked for him?" "Since he first came to the territory 10 years ago. Just a boy he was, with big dreams and the stubbornness to make them real." Mrs. Hawkins smiled fondly. "He's a good man, Mrs. Nielsen. The best I know." Over the following weeks, as December gave way to January, Ruby gradually recovered her strength. Little Thomas thrived, growing plumper by the day. Wade was often busy with ranch work, but he made time each evening to sit with Ruby, sharing the day's news and occasionally reading aloud from one of the many books that filled his study. Ruby found herself looking forward to these quiet evenings. Wade was unlike any man she had known, thoughtful, educated, yet unpretentious in his manner. He spoke to her as an equal, valuing her opinions and experiences. "You're different from most ranchers I've met," she observed one evening as they sat before the fire, Thomas sleeping peacefully in a cradle Wade had crafted himself. Wade looked up from the book he had been reading. "How so? You read Shakespeare. You discuss politics. You ask what I think about the territorial governor's latest proclamation." A smile touched Wade's lips. "My father was a professor in Boston before he caught gold fever and dragged us all to California. He believed education was as essential as breathing, even on the frontier." "And your mother?" "She taught music until she died when I was 15. After that, it was just my father and me. He never recovered from losing her." Wade's gaze grew distant. "When he passed, I sold everything and came east, determined to build something permanent." Ruby thought about his words. "Is that why you're helping me fight for my land? Because it represents something permanent?" Wade considered this. "Partly, but mostly because I can't abide bullies like Blackwell who think might makes right." The conversation shifted then to more practical matters. Wade had discovered through his contacts in town that Blackwell was proceeding with legal maneuvers to claim Ruby's property, citing abandonment. "We need to establish that you fled under duress and intend to return," Wade explained. "That means filing a formal complaint with the territorial court." "Will they believe me over Blackwell? He has powerful friends." "So do I," Wade said with determination. "Including Judge Harmon, who happens to despise Blackwell almost as much as I do." The next morning, Wade drove Ruby and Thomas into Las Cruces. The town had grown considerably since Ruby's last visit, with new buildings lining the main street and a general bustle of activity. Despite the winter weather, Judge Harmon received them in his chambers, a dignified older man with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. He listened carefully to Ruby's account of the attack on her farm, asking pointed questions about dates and specific threats. "Blackwell's getting bolder," the judge remarked when she had finished. "This is the third case of intimidation I've heard this month." But this time there was arson and attempted murder, Wade pointed out. Surely that warrants more than a fine. Judge Harmon sighed. Proof is the issue, Mr. Rawlins. Mrs. Nielsen's testimony is compelling but without witnesses. I have something, Ruby interrupted. From her reticule, she withdrew a folded piece of paper. One of the men dropped this when they were setting the fire. It's a map with properties marked, including mine, and it has Blackwell's signature. The judge examined the document carefully. This could be significant. Combined with similar complaints from other homesteaders, we might finally have enough to move against him. What about Ruby's land in the meantime? Wade asked. I'll issue an injunction preventing any transfer of ownership while the investigation proceeds, Judge Harmon said. But Mrs. Nielsen, I must caution you Blackwell won't take this lying down. It might be safer to stay away from your property until matters are resolved. Outside the courthouse, Ruby felt both relieved and apprehensive. I've started something that can't be easily finished, she said as Wade helped her into the wagon. You've stood up for what's rightfully yours, Wade corrected her. There's honor in that. Their eyes met, and Ruby felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the winter sun. In that moment, she realized that her feelings for Wade had grown far beyond gratitude. The thought both thrilled and frightened her. As if sensing her turmoil, Wade gently touched her hand. One step at a time, Ruby. For now, let's get Thomas home where it's warm. Home. The word echoed in Ruby's mind as they drove back to the ranch. Somehow, in just a few short weeks, Wade's house had begun to feel like home in a way her own farm never quite had. The realization unsettled her. That evening, after Thomas was asleep, Ruby found Wade in his study, poring over account books. I've been thinking, she said, gathering her courage. Once this business with Blackwell is settled, Thomas and I should find a place of our own. We've imposed on your kindness too long. Wade set down his pen. You're not imposing, Ruby, having you and Thomas here. He paused, choosing his words carefully. It's made this house feel alive again. Even so, I can't expect you to support us indefinitely. Is that what you think I'm doing? Supporting you out of charity? Wade stood, frustration evident in his movements. You contribute more than you know. Mrs. Hawkins smiles again. The men work harder knowing there's a woman and child to protect. Even Emmett has stopped threatening to retire to Mexico. Ruby was taken aback by his vehemence. I just meant, I know what you meant, Wade said, his voice softening. But I want you to understand something. Having you here isn't a burden, it's a gift I never expected. He stepped closer, his eyes holding hers. One I'm not eager to relinquish. Ruby's heart beat faster. Wade. Before she could continue, the sound of hoofbeats interrupted the moment. Wade moved to the window, instantly alert. Riders, he said tersely. Stay here. He grabbed his rifle from above the fireplace and strode outside. Ruby hurried to Thomas's cradle, gathering the sleeping infant in her arms. Through the window, she could see Wade confronting 3 men at the edge of the yard, his stance tense but controlled. After what seemed an eternity, the riders wheeled their horses and galloped away. Wade watched them go before returning to the house, his expression grim. Blackwell's men? Ruby asked, though she already knew the answer. Wade nodded. Delivering a friendly warning. Seems our visit to Judge Harmon today ruffled some important feathers. What did they say? Nothing worth repeating. Wade placed his rifle back in its rack with careful precision. But they won't be back tonight. This is exactly what I feared, Ruby said, holding Thomas closer. I've brought danger to your door. The danger was already here, Wade replied. Blackwell's been trying to expand his holdings for years. Sooner or later he would have come for my land too. He moved to stand beside her, gently brushing a finger across Thomas's cheek. Besides, some things are worth fighting for. The tenderness in his touch sent a shiver through Ruby. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Not for myself, but for Thomas, for you." Wade's hand moved to cover hers where it cradled the baby. "Fear is natural. Giving in to it isn't. My father taught me that. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was." Wade's smile held a hint of sadness. "He also taught me that a man who won't stand for something isn't much of a man at all." The days that followed brought increasing tension. Word arrived that Blackwell was gathering supporters, claiming that Wade was harboring a squatter with designs on land rightfully purchased by the territory's most prominent citizen. In town, opinions divided between those who respected Wade's reputation for fairness and those swayed by Blackwell's wealth and influence. Through it all, Wade remained steadfast. He doubled the guards on the ranch, sent telegrams to allies in Santa Fe, and continued gathering evidence of Blackwell's illegal activities. Ruby assisted in any way she could, writing letters, organizing documents, and even meeting with other homesteaders who had faced similar intimidation. One evening in early February, as a light snow fell outside, Ruby sat at the kitchen table writing yet another account of the attack on her farm. Wade entered, stomping snow from his boots. "Cold out there," he remarked, moving to warm his hands by the stove. Ruby set down her pen. "Any news from town? Judge Harmon has officially opened an investigation into Blackwell's land acquisitions," Wade reported, "and the territorial marshal is sending deputies to assist." "That's wonderful," Ruby exclaimed. Wade's expression remained serious. "It also means Blackwell is running out of legal options. That makes him dangerous." Ruby had learned enough about frontier justice to understand his concern. "What can we do?" "Be vigilant and proceed with our plans." Wade pulled a chair beside her, his manner suddenly hesitant. "Speaking of plans, there's something I've been meaning to discuss with you." Ruby felt her heart quicken at his tone. "Your land," Wade continued. "The soil there is better suited for crops than my eastern pastures. I've been thinking about a partnership. Your farming expertise combined with my resources." "A partnership," Ruby repeated, uncertain whether to feel relieved or disappointed by the practical nature of his proposal. "To start with," Wade said carefully, "though I hope it might lead to something more permanent in time." The implication of his words hung between them. Ruby studied his face, the clear blue eyes that had first earned her trust in the snowstorm, the strong lines that spoke of both hardship and character. "Wade," she began, "are you suggesting—" The sound of a rifle shot shattered the evening quiet. Wade was on his feet instantly, pulling Ruby down behind the solid oak table as a second shot splintered the window. "Stay down," he ordered, crawling to the cabinet where he kept a loaded shotgun. "When I move to the door, take Thomas and go to the root cellar. There's a trap door in the back that leads to a tunnel. Emmett will be waiting at the other end." "I'm not leaving you," Ruby protested. Wade's gaze held hers for a brief, intense moment. "You have to. Thomas needs his mother." Before she could argue further, he added softly, "And I need to know you're safe if I'm going to end this." Another shot rang out, followed by shouts from the ranch hands who were returning fire. Wade moved with practiced efficiency, signaling to Mrs. Hawkins, who appeared from the pantry with Thomas already bundled in her arms. "Go now," Wade urged. "I'll find you when it's over." Ruby felt torn between fear for her child and unwillingness to abandon Wade. Making her decision, she took Thomas from Mrs. Hawkins. "Promise me you'll be careful." Wade's smile was quick but genuine. "I promise. Now go." The root cellar was dark and cool, smelling of earth and preserved vegetables. Mrs. Hawkins led the way with a lantern, revealing a heavy wooden door set into the rear wall. It opened onto a narrow tunnel, roughly hewn but sturdy. Mr. Rawlins had this built when Blackwell first started causing trouble, the older woman explained. Said a man should always have a back door. The tunnel stretched for nearly 100 yards, emerging finally in a small cabin hidden among pine trees. Emmett was waiting, rifle ready, his weathered face tense with worry. "Any word?" Mrs. Hawkins asked. "Riders attacked from the south," Emmett reported. 15, maybe 20 men. The boys were ready, though. They won't take the ranch easily." Ruby cradled Thomas, who had remarkably slept through the entire ordeal. "How long should we wait?" Mr. Rawlins said to stay put until he comes himself or sends word with the password, Emmett replied. "Could be hours." The wait was agonizing. Ruby paced the small cabin, alternating between nursing Thomas and peering anxiously through the window at the distant main house. Occasional gunfire punctuated the night, sometimes close, sometimes farther away. "They're moving the fight off the property," Emmett observed around midnight. "That's good. Means our boys are pushing them back." Dawn was breaking when a knock sounded at the door. Emmett raised his rifle, positioning himself protectively in front of Ruby and Mrs. Hawkins. "Who's there?" he called. "California Gold makes poor biscuits," came the reply, Wade's voice using the agreed-upon password. Emmett opened the door to reveal Wade, disheveled and sporting a bandage around his left arm, but very much alive. Ruby rushed forward, Thomas still in her arms, relief overwhelming her usual reserve. "You're hurt," she said, noting the blood-stained bandage. "Just a graze," Wade assured her. "Nothing compared to what Blackwell got." Ruby looked up sharply. "Is he dead?" "No, but he's under arrest, along with 6 of his men. The others scattered when the marshal's deputies arrived." "How did they get here so quickly?" Mrs. Hawkins asked. Wade's exhausted face broke into a satisfied smile. "They were already on their way. Judge Harmon issued warrants yesterday based on the evidence we gathered. The marshal was bringing them here to serve when they heard the gunfire." "So it's over?" Ruby asked, hardly daring to believe it. "Blackwell will face trial for fraud, intimidation, and now attempted murder," Wade confirmed. "And the judge has already voided all land transfers made under duress. Your farm is still yours, Ruby." The news should have filled Ruby with joy, but instead she felt a curious emptiness. "I suppose that means Thomas and I can go home now." Wade's smile faded. He glanced at Emmett and Mrs. Hawkins, who took the hint and discreetly moved outside, closing the door behind them. "Is that what you want?" Wade asked quietly. "To go back to your farm?" Ruby looked down at Thomas, peacefully sleeping against her chest. "It's what I fought for," she said, though the words lacked conviction even to her own ears. Wade stepped closer. "Ruby, I didn't finish what I was trying to say earlier, about the partnership." "I remember," she said, her heart beginning to race again. Wade took a deep breath. "I don't just want your land and my land to join. I want our lives to join too." His voice, usually so confident, held a note of uncertainty. "I know it's too soon. I know you're still grieving Thomas's father, but these past weeks, watching you with your son, seeing your strength and your kindness, I've come to care for you both more than I thought possible." Ruby felt tears welling in her eyes. "Wade, you don't have to answer now," he hurried on. "Or even soon. Just know that whenever you're ready, if you ever are, there's a place for you here. Not as a guest or a partner, but as the heart of this home." Ruby studied his face, the sincerity in his eyes, the nervous set of his mouth. In the weeks since he had found her in the snow, this man had risked everything to protect her and her child, expecting nothing in return. He had treated her with respect when others saw only a vulnerable widow. He had fought for her rights when it would have been easier to stand aside. "I cared for Thomas," she said softly. "He was kind and good, and I would have been content with the life we planned." She stepped closer to Wade, But what I feel for you, it's different, deeper somehow. As if meeting you awakened something I didn't know was sleeping. Hope dawned in Wade's eyes. Ruby, are you saying? I'm saying I don't want to go back to my farm alone, Ruby interrupted gently. I'm saying that Thomas needs a father who will teach him to be as honorable and brave as you are. I'm saying that the partnership I want extends far beyond land. Wade's smile bloomed slowly, transforming his tired face. With careful movements, mindful of the baby between them, he cupped Ruby's face in his hands and lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepening with a promise of all that might come. When they finally parted, Wade rested his forehead against hers. I never expected to find love again, he whispered. Especially not in a snowstorm. Ruby laughed softly, joy bubbling through her exhaustion. Sometimes the most precious things come when we least expect them. Wade's arm circled her waist, and together they looked down at Thomas, who had awakened and was regarding them with solemn curiosity. What do you think, young man? Wade asked the infant. Should we make this arrangement permanent? Thomas gurgled and waved a tiny fist, causing both adults to laugh. I believe that's a yes, Ruby said, leaning into Wade's embrace. Spring came early to Las Cruces that year. By March, the snow had melted from all but the highest peaks, and the valley bloomed with wildflowers. On a perfect Saturday morning, with the scent of new growth in the air, Ruby Nielsen became Ruby Rawlins in a simple ceremony attended by friends and neighbors. Judge Harmon himself performed the service, his official dignity somewhat undermined by his obvious pleasure in the occasion. Mrs. Hawkins wept openly throughout, while Emmett stood proudly as Wade's best man, his weathered face creased in a rare smile. Thomas, now 3 months old and thriving, watched the proceedings from the arms of Mrs. Sanchez, occasionally cooing as if adding his approval to the vows being exchanged. I thought I lost everything when they burned my farm, Ruby said later as she and Wade danced beneath lanterns strung in the ranch yard. Now I realize I gained so much more than I lost. Wade's arms tightened around her. We both did. His eyes moved to where Thomas was being fussed over by a circle of admiring women. Though I'm beginning to think our son is going to be thoroughly spoiled by all this attention. Our son, Ruby repeated, savoring the words. That still sounds like a miracle to me. The real miracle was finding you in that snowstorm, Wade said softly. Of all the trails I might have taken that day, something led me to the one where you needed help. Ruby rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Perhaps it wasn't chance at all, but destiny, Wade chuckled. Now you sound like Mrs. Hawkins. She's convinced we were fated to meet. And what do you think? Wade's expression grew serious. I think a man makes his own fate by the choices he makes. And choosing to help you that day was the best decision of my life. As twilight deepened into night, the celebration continued around them. Ruby and Wade slipped away to check on Thomas, now sleeping peacefully in what had become the nursery. Standing together beside his cradle, their hands naturally entwined, they resembled any young family except for the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. I want to plant apple trees, Ruby said suddenly. On both properties, a symbol of our new beginning. Wade smiled. Apple trees it is, and perhaps a new house too, halfway between the ranch and your farm, large enough for Thomas to have brothers and sisters one day. Ruby turned in his arms, her eyes bright with happiness. One day soon, she promised, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. In the years that followed, the Rawlins family prospered. The apple orchards flourished, becoming famous throughout the territory for their sweet fruit. Wade and Ruby's partnership proved as successful in business as it was in marriage. their combined lands growing into one of the most productive operations in the region. Thomas grew into a strong, thoughtful boy with his mother's spirit and his adoptive father's sense of justice. He was 7 when his sister Elizabeth was born, followed 2 years later by twins Michael and James. The large house Wade had built echoed with children's laughter and the everyday sounds of a happy family. Jeremiah Blackwell served 5 years in the territorial prison before being released, a broken man with neither wealth nor influence remaining. He left New Mexico, never to return. His departure marked the end of an era of intimidation for the small farmers and ranchers of the region. Ruby and Wade's story became something of a legend in Las Cruces, how a cowboy found a pregnant woman running through deep snow, gave her his horse and walked behind her to safety, and in doing so discovered the love and family he had thought forever lost. People said it proved that even in the harshest conditions, compassion could bloom into something beautiful and enduring. On cold winter evenings, when snow blanketed the land much as it had on that fateful December day, Wade would often stand at the window of their home, watching the white landscape with a peculiar expression of gratitude. "What are you thinking?" Ruby would ask, coming to stand beside him. And Wade would draw her close, his voice soft with wonder even after all their years together. "I'm thinking that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as hardship, and that I will never stop being thankful for a snowstorm that changed everything." In the corner of their living room stood a small cradle, carefully preserved though their youngest children had long outgrown it. It served as a reminder of Thomas's first weeks, of Wade's gentle care, and of a love that had begun in the most unlikely of circumstances. "I was so afraid that day," Ruby would sometimes recall. "Running through the snow, certain Thomas and I would die alone in the cold." "But you didn't," Wade would remind her, his fingers intertwining with hers. "You survived, we all did, and built something wonderful together." On their 25th wedding anniversary, as their children and grandchildren gathered to celebrate, Wade presented Ruby with a special gift, a small painting he had commissioned of a woman on horseback, with a man walking beside her through a snowy landscape. "To remember how our story began," he explained as Ruby's eyes filled with tears of joy. "As if I could ever forget," she whispered, leaning into his embrace. That night, as the moon cast silver light across the land they had nurtured together, Ruby reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment of fulfillment. From desperate flight through deadly snow to the warmth of enduring love, her path had been neither straight nor easy. Yet every step, even the most painful ones, had led her home to Wade, to their children, to a life richer and more meaningful than she could have imagined on that frigid December day when a stranger had offered his horse and his help with no thought of reward. "I love you, Wade Rawlins," she murmured as they drifted toward sleep in the home they had built together. "And I love you, Ruby Rawlins," he replied, his voice still holding the same wonder it had the first time he spoke those words. "Yesterday, today, and all our tomorrows." Outside, a gentle snow began to fall, covering the land in quiet beauty, no longer a threat but a reminder of how their love had begun, and how it continued to flourish, season after season, year after year, a testament to the enduring power of compassion, courage, and the unexpected journeys that lead us to where we truly belong.